Hey everybody, my name is Eddie Buchanan with the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk podcast on fire engineering. We're at FDIC Live 2025. It is Thursday. We're about to come to the conclusion of Thursday at FDIC. So far, we're all still here and hydrated and awake, so life is doing good. This particular podcast brought to you by Firehouse Subs, the firefighter-founded hot sub chain with a passion for hearty and flavorful food, heartfelt service, and public safety. If you're ready for your next mission, Firehouse Subs is offering firefighters the opportunity to continue serving after their service, and now as restaurant owners. You can learn more about that. You can go to firehousesubsfranchising.com. So check that out. I've actually got friends that have done that, and they speak very highly of the opportunities. So be sure to check that out. And we're back. We're back again. So with me today, I've got my good buddy, Chief Mike Cox from Esri, and Mike is a retired assistant chief from Henrico Fire. You will give him a little hello?
Yep, Henrico County. Thanks for having me, Ed. Glad to be back.
Explain what Esri is real quick.
Esri is the largest geospatial software provider on the planet, so the fire service will see it a lot in their day-to-day mapping, routing maps, things like that, but certainly around pre-plans, data analytics, and then risk reduction efforts are all using geospatial data to meet those mission objectives, right? So
awesome.
we're a big player in that house, I guess.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Data in space, as I always like to say.
Yep.
And then we've got my friend Josh Piercy from Oklahoma City Fire Department. You're on a rescue up there?
I am. Yep, heavy rescue in Oklahoma City, and thanks for having me. It's fun to sit in here and chat with you guys for a little bit.
So I figured today, kind of what we did, we had the show on FDIC last year, and we kind of talked about the state of data and what was happening a year ago, and what have we seen progress, and where do we see it going? And I've got lots of notes of things that I've already seen on the exhibit floor and stuff we'll see later this week. Mike, you were here last year. What do you think? What do you think the biggest evolution has been? The biggest change related to data and tech, at least?
Well, I mean, the buzzword of the week is AI, right? AI and machine learning, and we're seeing that now embedded in more applications. Certainly, we're doing that at Esri. But the AI bots, kind of helping you get things done where you don't necessarily know how to code to use some of these technologies anymore. You can ask simple questions. We had a company come by earlier. An agency come by earlier, worrying about tier 2 reporting from businesses to report their hazmat, and literally could ask an AI bot the question, hey, generate a survey that we could send to business owners, and it goes out and it checks the relevant codes and standards like SARA Title III and what that might be, and builds it for you. So ask one question in a couple clicks, and I've got a usable product to send to the public to gather data that then can inform risk to our response based on hazmat storage type issues, things like that. Just amazing.
Josh, are you seeing anything locally?
Man, you're seeing more and more AI, adaptive learning, ChatGPT, this kind of format of of things, and you're seeing in the training space, guys, starting with, okay, build me a presentation on vendor search.
Right.
And AI can give us a rough print. You can go in and fine tune it, but it's getting the bulk of it onto the slides already, and you're seeing that more and more, I think, in classes. Not that we ever want to teach just off of an AI platform only, but if it does 80% of the work, you put your flair to the end of it, I mean, guys are more efficient with their time that way.
So I saw a couple of classes here this year at FDIC that featured some sort of AI topic. So anytime if I could get in there, I would go check it out and listen. And I was teaching a workshop in another state a couple weeks ago with a bunch of trainers, a bunch of instructors, and it was the topic of AI came up, right? And in that group were people who were academic type of educators, high school teachers, maybe some college professors. And it sparked this big debate. AI came up, and man, they went, they got a little bristly about the idea of AI. So I was sitting in, because they don't want their students to use it, right? They don't want that to be a thing. So I was sitting in a class earlier this week at FDIC about this, and this was from college level educators, but it wasn't that so much the students were using AI, it was that the educators were. Right.
Oh, wow.
So they had actually created tutors, AI tutors, that they could load their content. This is the EMS-focused program. They could load their content into the AI. They could, generate like little bots to put their students through scenarios. They could put their students through. Like Google QAs, have a little bot pop up. Remember the old paperclip in the old days? For those of us old enough to know what that was, they could have a conversation with that, and as a way to tutor their students on their own. like asynchronous tutoring. Have you seen anything like?
Well, I'm trying to add that or get to the day-to-day operations and how it will impact the efficiencies we're seeing, in response. And one thing that while you were having that conversation about the tutor is that we have, companies on the floor this week that have AI built into, say, EMS reporting. So you're on scene and you can have an AI listen to you while you provide care to a patient, and it's literally writing that patient care report narrative, and also bringing in, CAD data and everything else you need for that report. But little or no documentation, manually after the call. It's not like we're going back to the firehouse and we're sitting in the parking lot at the hospital finishing the PCR. We're actually having it done while we're providing care. Those kind of things that are going to help build efficiencies in the day-to-day operations. I think you'll see more and more of that. And then certainly, we had a tech summit yesterday, and great content. Certainly encourage everybody to come a day early next year and attend that technology summit. But there was a long discussion around robotics, and certainly UAS is a core component of response now. It's kind of an expectation. But even beyond the ground vehicles, UGVs, you see a lot of the firefighting tank tread type vehicles here. But looking at Optimus and those kind of robots, and what is that going to be the impact on firefighting? And we'd like to say, a firefighter could never be replaced by a robot. And I think to some degree that's true, but in certain circumstances, hazmat response. If I could send, a device, a robot, into a hot zone to take care of whatever it might be, pipe repair, valve, whatever, instead of putting a firefighter in a suit and have to worry about exposure or that hazard, that's saving me a lot of risk, right? That's preventing a lot of exposure to certain, potentially dangerous environments, I think. So I think that's a discussion we really need to wrap our heads around is what does that look like? And one example I gave was we were recently in Singapore with the Civil Defense Services there, and they actually have a type of engine that they took a firefighter off of to put a robot on it. So rubber-wheeled robot, carries 30 liters of water, has a vent fan on top, a nozzle. You literally run it with an Xbox controller, and it fits on an elevator. Everything they have there is high-rise. Yeah. So you can send this thing up, drive to a kitchen fire, and potentially put that out. Now, ask the guys if it actually works. They'll, that kind of thing. But they're trying, and that's the kind of evolution I think you'll continue to see is things like that.
Yeah, to your point about UASs, we're doing that locally even for the last couple of years with, unmanned UAS for hazmat response.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And on it with a camera, FLIR, 4-gas monitor. We've had a train derailment, and then fly that drone, basically, not supposed to say drone, UAS, a half a mile down the line, which before that would have been, the gravel on the side of the tracks. Very difficult process to get down there, see what we actually have,
and
find out if we have hazmat spilling off the track.
Putting 6 guys in a suit, setting up a decon line.
Suits, backup, all the time.
So that's
and
efficiency.
How much more efficient is it to just, hey, we'll launch this, fly down, let it scan the atmosphere, and then, instant feedbacking, right? Now we're on tablets in the command post. It's
right. Well,
it's an exciting time.
Let's talk about that. So the adoption of technology and the culture of the fire service. So
culture has a lot to do with it, right? And that's not just the resistance to change, though, but the culture of how do we want to adapt to these new technologies or not.
So I'm thinking of all the changes I've seen with technology since the early 80s. SCBA was kind of that was just becoming a thing when our generation started showing up, and that saw resistance. We saw thermal imaging with we finally got it, but at first it took a minute. Pass devices is another example where you had to take our human behavior out of it for us to get it to work, right? I have one on my belt, but I cut it on sometimes, that type of thing. So it finally became integrated into the SCBAs and whatnot. Do you think we're getting better? Is it a generation? Is this, we often have discussions about generations, and the folks that come up now have always had a smartphone. Is that going to influence things, you think?
I think it is. I think we're already seeing it, right? Like I came in the fire service in 2001, so I didn't quite grow up with a cell phone, but it was definitely in college and right before I became a fireman. But now the guys that are coming on they don't know life pre-digital technology, right? So while maybe sometimes decision makers are harder to buy into this culture, it's so influenced through the younger generation, almost at some departments, you have to keep up. Like everyone else is on their phone doing these programs and using technology. Like you have to leverage it.
It's the balance of innovation and tradition.
And almost, I mean, these kids have an expectation, right? When you're hiring them in the
think
recruit
so.
school, yeah, I mean, they're expecting to have access to these kind of technologies.
I think the other side, though, is like technology has to make that guy's job easier at the end of the day.
Yes.
Like to have technology just to have it, if it ultimately is more difficult to use, then that's a hindrance to the whole leveraging technology into the fire service, right? I mean, like, if it makes your job easier, it's easier for those guys to buy into and say, okay, I'm in. Pass devices became easier
Right.
to use, right? They don't really like pass devices, but now that they're integrated, they're like, well, I have to use it.
Nobody questions the honey shake anymore, right? You just,
No,
you
every
just do that.
every
It's
20
just part of
seconds,
what- yeah.
somebody else beeps and we all shake.
Yeah. Somebody's going to set that to music one day.
Yeah.
A video on Facebook or something.
That's a great idea.
So I think one of the things I often wrestle with in my own head is what's the difference? I'm looking at the adaptation of technology, maybe using robotics and things to do traditionally that we would have done as firefighters, and then our belief of we still bring a blue-collar attitude to the job, right? Like we want to get in there and do that work. How do you see us evolving through that? I mean, if I could have a firefighter or use the tank type track vehicle to go suppress a structure fire, how do you feel about that? Like how is the rank and file going to feel about our ability to do that as that improves?
I've been retired for 6 years, and if you'd have told me that story 8 years ago, I'd have been pissed off, right? I would not have been happy about even considering, that we're going to stop doing interior operations because I've got a better alternative. But it has to be addressed, right? You have to consider how we're going to adapt to these technologies, because if, as a fire service, our culture doesn't shift, somebody's going to shift it for us, because the efficiencies it builds in, and then the fact that physical resources like robots and UAS and drones are cheaper than human resources. Somebody above your chain of command is going to make that decision for you if you don't adapt to it ahead and start that process now, right? So, we can be part of the solution, or we can fight it, which, where I grew up, there's a little bit of that, say EMS. We're not getting an ambulance. We're a fire department. Why do we need an ambulance? Well, now we have 18.
You have many.
And if, as a deputy chief, I had the conversation often. It's like, we should stop running EMS and do the third party, all that. It's like, okay, that's great. You pick the first 200 people that are going home, because those ambulances, cause us to hire a lot of staff, a lot of personnel.
Right.
But it's going to be a similar, it's change management, I guess, but similar adaptive approach, I think, to
Almost like 2 in 2 out, right? If you remember back
Oh, my God,
back
yeah.
there,
Yeah.
we had, as a fire service as a whole, had a problem. Kind of knew we had a problem. Didn't really do anything aggressively to address it, or at least to have something that would stick. And ultimately, if you don't address these things, somebody eventually will for you in a regulatory way, and probably not with your core values in mind. So. What do you? I mean, you're on the job. You're out there still.
I'm not there yet. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think there's a place yet. Hazmat situation or industrial firefighting with tank farm fires, that is a separate scenario that definitely seems to play more to that story.
Yeah.
But I mean, data's great, but I'm still of the impression that data is only as good as it's interpreted by a person. And like robots currently aren't going into fires and being able to pull victims out. I mean, like now there's a product on the floor here that I was part of a study the last few weeks trying. I don't know if we're supposed to say, well, anyways, but through adaptive and integrated, as you look through the thermal camera, it picks up lines and hard shapes. So it picks out doors and floors and holes. Absolutely, that technology we could use in the field today. Now, I don't know we can strap that to a robot and let it go and make good decisions, because some things it picked up it's not perfect, right? And it doesn't see everything, but it gives pretty good identifying shapes and learning where you're at. It cookie crumbed where we went so we could get back out. I mean, these kind of ideas are exciting that people are trying to integrate it.
Right.
And as it comes more, we'll see, but.
I agree with you. I think a lot of the tech that we see coming online now, it goes back to the core mission. Our mission is to save lives and property. If they develop a tool that allows that to occur faster or more efficient and more consistent, to your point, right? We have to be consistently able to do that. Okay, then we'll talk about what that is. I don't know that we'll ever get to the point that we're not gearing up and doing our thing. But if you can give me tools that let me do my thing better, faster, and if safer, great.
Absolutely. You have to be open-minded to
Right.
the idea that, okay, let's try it and see where we're at. And
I guess the introduction of
adapt it to
any
work.
new tool.
Sure.
You're
absolutely.
going to fuss about it for a little while, and eventually some will stick.
I remember having conversations 2020, 2021. There won't be any self-driving cars on the road before 2040.
Right.
There's self-driving cars on the road 5 years later, right? Full self-drive. And you're going to see similar, I think, advances in the fire service. And I don't disagree that, I mean, to me, you still put a firefighter between the hazard and the customer and the taxpayer. And that's why we swore an oath to do that 100%. But if I can, again, save exposure to my guys and girls by putting a device in place or having a more efficient response somehow. And that could include that search capability and to be able to get in and get out much quicker and safer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But we got to be at least consider that adopting that technology as we move forward.
And this next 10 years, I think we'll look at the speed of change as the speed of change increases. But who knows what it'll look like 10 years from now? I mean,
you can't guess.
Yeah,
You can't.
who knows?
Well, like you said, I mean, you guys were on then. The first ticks that came out were how big?
Oh, yeah,
right?
it was a
I
big
mean,
helmet mounted.
There was
was
a
a
helmet
monster.
mounted thing,
Yeah.
and then even the handhelds were like a
Right.
small ice chest.
Yeah.
Cinder
and
block.
now we've got thermal imagers that are slightly bigger than the end of an ink pen. I mean,
Right.
or the little tiny, smaller than your cell phone.
Yeah.
And that's been in 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
Yeah.
so where are we going to be in another 10 years?
Right. But
Well-
part of this too is, for leadership, for people that are trying to identify that technology to adopt, is to have a plan of adoption, and that's what I see a lot too in the fire service. Is we see a new shiny thing, we go grab it, we just want to play with it or whatever. But if you don't have good policy and governance in place for your technology, then it can be a losing proposition because that affects how it's adopted in the field. It affects the support you provide for it, the training you provide for it. And if you don't have all that lined up and the support of your partner agencies like your IT department or whoever else might be involved in that purchasing and maintenance program, you're going to lose. So having the both administrative and that policy and governance in place is critical, and we're not discussing that at all in the fire service, it seems like,
I know,
outside of the IT department.
I was just at another panel out in the stadium where we were talking about integration of data too. So it's not just let me buy the new shiny thing and that other shiny thing and this other shiny thing. If none of those things talk to each other,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
it's not going to ultimately work. So we were using the example of the universal fitting on the SCBA, like how difficult that was over the years to, it took some work, man. It took some regulation actually to finally make the various providers of SCBA, look, you just got to do this. And ultimately it was finally done, So I think you might see over the next 10 years, better data governance, more data governance. Probably somebody, like I said, if you don't fix it, somebody will ultimately do it for you. And then the ability for these devices to all talk to each other. We can chat about Nearest here in a second too, but the fact that there's going to be a common common data collection source, at least that one. There are other things that are out on the horizon too. That's a whole new landscape.
Yeah. Yeah.
That we still have yet to address. I mean, data governance, we haven't even started that. What do you have locally? Is that something? I know you guys have been very progressive in that, but it's as like defining what is data, who can see it, who can't see it, how long do we keep it, where does it live, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I don't know. Well,
Right. I mean,
yeah.
But no,
as
I mean, I
close
think
as the fire departments. in the
Exactly.
country.
Most
Right.
agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same answer. And then, to have the relationships to make those kind of adoptions successful. That's a key, critical point in this
Yeah.
is do that. I say it almost every day. Grab some coffee and donuts and go sit down with your IT director, or particularly if it's outside the fire department.
Right.
If your IT, GIS doesn't report to your fire chief, you better have a good relationship with them, because if they're not in the fire department with you, they don't understand your priorities unless you go tell them. And they're as worried about keeping school buses on their routes as they are about getting fire trucks out the door.
Yep.
So until you engage with them and establish that relationship to help with the policy development and the governance issues and the overall adoption, another one you may lose if you don't do it that correctly, right? If you don't engage the right way.
Yeah, there are a few fire departments that have been, or at least have good starts on data governance, those types of things. The one thing I've noticed about all those departments is it's whole of government approach, right? So the fire department, while your local government may not be down that path, or maybe they're down that path and you don't know it, they haven't invited you to the meeting yet. That could be a possibility. But certainly, if it hasn't happened, then this is a good catalyst for you to go make it happen. Like you said, get coffee and donuts and go start having those conversations and talk about what's going on. I know the ICMA and some of the conferences that your elected officials and senior government leaders go to, they are talking about it. So, it's I did a workshop the other day where I pulled what are these groups that they go to their conferences? What are they saying in those conferences about the fire department? And they were talking about things like, what to do with underutilized fire and EMS units, what to do with, they were looking at things that are very data-driven, data-informed metrics that I don't know that fire chiefs and fire departments are necessarily aware of.
Right.
So if we don't get on it soon, somebody else will.
Yeah.
Which is efficiency, right? I mean, that's what they're looking at. Like, how efficient are these units? How much time are they on the road? I mean, I get it. To me, that's the data management that, departments, either they're not leveraging, like they're looking for and trying to find in these directions that, okay, this is what we're doing, but is what we're doing, do we know, what are the results of that? We've always said it's good, but do we know it's good?
Well, it's a big investment, man. You put a new unit on the road, a new firehouse, you're talking millions of dollars and lots of time and effort.
Sure.
Is it in the right place? Is it meeting the objectives that were set? I mean, you've got to have some measurement of performance to be able to even get close to getting that right.
And we come from that culture that, well, we do this because this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Like, that rig has always been at this station because that's what it's been. Well, is that still the best purpose for, looking at, even locally, we looked at call volume overall, types of calls those rigs are going on, and then are we still addressing the right area with the right apparatus for it, right?
Yeah.
Or is it time that because of building development or neighborhoods or the calls have changed, aging population, is there better use of ladders and engines? And same general idea.
I've noticed most ladders they were in the station they're in because that's the bay door they fit in.
Yeah, so that is definitely a thing. Yeah.
So
Where we work, all ladders have to be under a certain height so they can fit in any station. It's been a problem. Yeah, it's definitely a situation.
Well, let's talk about Nearest. Last year when we were here, it was kind of starting to stand up as a firm concept. Like, we kind of knew what it was. I guess I think the big news last year was data schema draft. Data schema was becoming available, and now we've migrated. I don't know how many departments on it now.
Onboarding, yeah,
they're onboarding, and I know that next May, they start the mass onboarding.
Yes.
So going by FEMA region. So if you're in the north, like the FEMA region 2, I believe is first. You start next month. So if you're not familiar with that, you might want to take a look.
Yeah, check on your RMS, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's exciting. It's exciting. It's going to be that near real-time data, and not only being able to, analysis on your own data and how you respond and where your gaps in service are and what's my call process time impacting my overall response time, all that stuff. I can also look at other localities easily.
Yeah.
So I can find, if I'm Richmond, Virginia, Oklahoma City's pretty close. What are they doing? How are they solving these problems based on the data they're generating, and being able to do that kind of comparison. But just to have all that data available in the cloud and accessible in the cloud, which is also kind of a public safety trend here in the last year we can talk about, is just the access and the ability to get that data for analysis for your agency. But also there's going to be a certain level of analysis provided by Nearest. So there'll be some, dashboard type visualizations of the data too. So that's all exciting stuff. That's a service that we've never had, at a national level. So pretty excited about that. What are you hearing about it locally?
I'm an end user, right? We use ESO still as a platform, which I'm going to speak out of my depth. I believe they are adopting it.
They are.
We won't know the difference. Well, my end user now, our IT department and the data-driven side, absolutely are going to be all over it. But as far as the end user, I think what I hear is it's just going to integrate into the screens that we already have.
Yeah, I think a lot of the goals with all of the RMS products that are participating in that is to try to make most of the work on the back end. So end user wise, if you've always clicked that button for that apparatus type or whatever, they can sort that out. Even talking to the Nearest guys, talking to like Craig, that's kind of leading that project. Yeah. They've done some interesting things. Like, I was worried about unit typing. Like, what are we going to do? Some people call it one thing, and some people call it something else. And how are we going to handle
Tanker
that?
tender.
Yeah, and yeah, you can get that. We could talk about an East Coast, West Coast thing there.
Terminology is regional.
Yeah.
Dialect is not the same across the U.S. Fire
Yeah.
Service. That is 100% true.
You get wet when you call both, but a tanker or a tender. But how you get it is a completely different thing on which coast you're on.
Yeah,
So
100%.
But yeah, so I'm curious to see. Also, I'm excited in the data schema for NERIS. They're doing some things beyond the air brake, which when you think about data in the fire service, we kind of measure everything from the first 911 call all the way up to the air brake, and then they stop all the watches. That's kind of it. And I'm excited to see some of the metrics that are tactical, that are beyond the air brake, that we've never had that information before.
Like Chief Brush's rescue survey
Yeah.
data. I mean, that's going to be a version of that almost is going to be in NERIS.
Oh, yeah.
It's awesome.
And in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge fire rescue survey fan.
Yeah.
Which now integrating some of those same questions into the NERIS platform. To me, those guys like that system makes so much sense. It's just something we never tracked, right? In the old system, you would track damage lost, amount of victims, injuries, but never wins. We didn't track how many rescues we
Right,
had.
right.
We couldn't tell you. I bet in your department where you came from,
Absolutely not.
Unless you know the stories, you
Yeah.
couldn't go back and be like, oh, in those 10 years, we rescued however many people.
Don't
It
know.
doesn't exist. That is information we need. Like, that should drive training in the fire service.
And drive budgets and drive hiring and drive
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If our motto and if we're here for them and we're here to save lives, like, why aren't we tracking
Yeah.
saving lives? We do in the EMS world, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm on a whole.
That's
You're
something
absolutely
I'm
right,
right, man.
right, but-
I think of the vulnerability dashboard that USFA had built that had done a surprisingly good job of trying to capture what the vulnerability for fire safety was in the United States. But the method they had to do to develop it was like, come on, man, really? They literally had a couple of folks that would scrub the news every day for fire fatalities. That was the methodology we had to be able. I didn't say we. They did all that work, and that was available at the time for them to collect that data and build that dashboard. So who knows what we missed?
Because they couldn't depend on NFIRS
Right.
to have valid recent data to actually pull from. Yeah. So NERIS corrects those kind of issues
Yeah.
as well because you got
So-
additional data in near real time and you'll be able to engage it however and whenever you want to. It's pretty good.
Like a current real world problem is lithium-ion battery fires.
Yep.
Perfect
right?
example.
Like
Perfect.
and
Yeah.
they're in everything, right? And here at FDIC, you see guys riding around on little scooters, and lithium-ion batteries are very much a thing in the fire service now. You think in a year with data collection through NERIS, we're going to be able to address the problem better? Because right now, I really don't know how many fires you've had or they've had. Like, we're all having our own problems, but unless you go to, there's a few workshops here, there's some classes here at FDIC about it, but how are we sharing what your side of the country is seeing and our side, and without collecting it?
100%. And how do you address or how do you perform risk reduction on that issue if you have no data
We don't know
about
what
what
the
the
risk is.
problem is?
We don't know what the-
we look
what the-
internationally. Singapore, as an example, they stopped it almost immediately because they had the data proving what was occurring and why it was occurring, and they just changed their import requirements. You can't import a lithium-ion battery into Singapore unless it meets a certain standard. We don't have that. We take any battery they make anywhere in the world. So their lithium-ion battery fires plummeted because they refuse to accept anything that's a high risk, what they say is a high risk. And just an amazing way to use the data. But they could justify that decision with real, with validated data based on their response. So that's the kind of things we'll be able to do. And also, Chief Jenkins from FSRI or UL presented yesterday. He said they currently, based on NFIRS and the way we collect data and analyze data in the fire service, it's 12 to 24 months before we even identify and define an emerging problem, like lithium-ion batteries.
Yeah.
Because when it really finally hit the national level of an issue, how long had it been going on? Probably years. And until we had the mass fatality fires like in Philly and New York, it really wasn't, a thing. But I want to say, FDNY has some pretty scary data come out about the number of fires caused by lithium-ion batteries in the city. And it was a very high percentage. It was incredible.
Which we're only a benefit from because they chose to share it and they chose to collect it. Right? Now, in a national system, if we're collecting more and then they're able to do some metrics and, in the next couple of years, exciting that we can leverage these kind of opportunities. You have that T-shirt that says, "Without good data, you're just guessing."
Yeah, yeah.
Like without knowing what we're doing, it's just a guess.
But
Like,
think about how that can drive code development and code
Yeah.
compliance issues. I mean, we have to have data to make those decisions and to justify the decisions we make, and we just simply don't have that now.
For sure. There's a cost associated with those decisions,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
someone's going to have to. There's a monetary figure of
Yeah.
you don't allow batteries, or you do, or where you store them.
And there's the next thing. Like this, we've identified lithium-ion batteries through the hard work of a few fire departments that were able to pick it up and capture some of that. With the battle tempo now out there and different threats, we don't know what we don't know yet. I mean, what's the next thing? What's the next problem going to be? And we'll be in a much better position to be able to pick that up.
Yep.
Just by scanning that data as it comes in and start to pick up, hey, you had a fluke kind of call. You thought that was a fluke. Well, you didn't know it happened 5 other times, across the country. Maybe it's not a fluke. Maybe it's the early signs of some other issue that we would be able to address.
Yep.
I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. I mean, when you look at what goes on in the country.
And the ability to identify these trends for whatever the risk may be is going to be much easier to define or to address, because we're not just looking at the data set for one fire department. We can start looking for patterns across the entire country based on nearest data. And the fact you're pulling that data down from the cloud to do whatever the analysis is you want to do. But just the sheer number of calls, to being able to identify those patterns and identify the new risk, whatever emerging risk, whatever they might be, is going to be a whole lot easier and much quicker, I think.
And there's some exposure tracking built into the system as well, I believe, right? Like, so the ability to track exposures and have more information when firefighters do turn up with occupational illness, that's a, it doesn't get all the airtime that the tactical stuff might get,
right?
But it's certainly as important. And when you have experienced a fatality, when one of your firefighters becomes sick and passes away, the ability to articulate their exposures is an important and critical part of that fight to get them to get their family the benefits that they deserve.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, that's the example of it's not important until it's important.
Oh, man.
Right? You don't think about exposures, you don't think about calls you've been
Yeah.
on until now. Oh, we need that information. Well, when was it? What were the chemicals there? I mean,
It's hard to do. I've had to do it.
Yeah.
It's a difficult
over a career
task.
or over how many months or years?
Yeah.
Tracking this. I mean,
That investigation's not having the right data is
Yeah.
very difficult. That's a lift, man. To go back through somebody's 30 or 40-year career and try to identify every time they're exposed to fire.
and you're looking at your spouse, like the pressure's on. I mean,
Yeah.
you want to be able to get those benefits. Like if they have kids, you think if the state I'm from, they can get state college. If they get that line of duty classification. So
Oh, wow.
I mean,
Wow.
you really need to. This is important stuff. I mean, to track those exposures, have that built in. So I mean, I think the attitude when you listen to this, you're thinking about nearest. You probably, like you said, you're an end user. It's not like top of your radar, right?
right. Yeah.
But you're kind of aware of it. Know it's a thing. I would certainly encourage everybody to lean into it a little bit. Let's make this thing. Let's get it across the finish line, so that we have that common data system. We have that ability to. The entry is just the beginning. It's what we can do with the after outcome of it. Let's talk. I want to talk about location and biometrics. That's if there was a theme I've picked up this week walking around the different classes and stuff. There's a lot of technology coming online to overcome the z-axis. That was always the problem. And when I say z-axis, what I'm talking about is we could always kind of track you horizontally on a flat space. That was always been around for a long time. But to follow you upstairs, right? To put that altitude on there on the z-axis was always the challenge. And now there's been several different options to overcome that, right? Different types of devices, different ways to do it. And then also, it's one thing to track a structure fire. A firefighter was at a structure fire, so we can make some assumptions about what exposures they had. I saw something today that also had the atmospheric monitoring built into it.
Nice.
Wow.
So you can test for certain gas. You're basically wearing a gas monitor as part of your location system, integrated with a wearable that brought in the biometrics. So I was pretty excited.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I was like, all right. So this to me, I think beyond getting the data basics down, getting the and having location, biometrics, and monitoring are probably the three most important things I think of from a tactical perspective. that I hope we get done in the next couple of years. I mean, if you seen anything, is that something's past either your
Not, I mean, I agree that it should be, and I don't know. This is not maybe my place in the fire service in my city, but in general, the equipment that we are all wearing, air packs, radios, pass devices, something should track our actual location,
Right.
and be able to be on a tablet or some kind of version outside. And some of that exists. It seems it's been hit or miss in my experience through different. I'm sure that's different companies or versions, but on especially large fires, we should be able to see where guys are. If I can
Yeah.
track your phone, and we all have equipment on us, there should be an ability to track us as we move through an area, right? And then make decisions off of where people are, if there was a collapse, if an event happened. That is not a standard across the fire service. Some
Right.
companies are offering it, but it's not. I mean, you know,
Have you seen the he's on a USAR team, the Type 1 Task Force. How are you seeing the impact of being able to track in the field during a large-scale wide area search type response? Or
oh, absolutely. That's been the greatest change in the last few years through an application, right? Through a web-based device, cloud-based,
Yeah.
all the
SARCOP
bases.
based
Yeah,
stuff.
SARCOP. So on your phone, right? You download an app, quick capture, and it tracks you. So and it's actually managing our incidents, helping us manage. So in real time, we're seeing where you are, what you've done. It's a big button app. You just click, and on the backside, guys like yourselves at a desk, we're looking at screens and we're seeing dashboards, all this data input, and we're being able to quickly make decisions. We're used to that would have been on paper at the end of a 8-hour shift of working. You'd come back and I'd compare my notes to yours, and we'd be like, well, where did we not go? And now, real time, I mean, we're much faster.
it's pretty incredible. Just to see it from afar, it's pretty impactful
Yeah.
to help. Well, first of all, deploy resources efficiently, bringing in additional data to know where risks are, and keep people from getting into hot zones. Like I love the flood modeling. And so, hey,
Yeah.
if the flood's 30 feet deep, I'm not sending people in there to do a search because we're not doing dive ops during a wide area search, right? So just things like that to help improve firefighter safety and the efficiency of deploying those resources during a wide area search. It's just incredible.
It's amazing. And there's,
Yeah.
man, like there's a product here. You go to the water's edge, get 2 different locations on the where the edge of the water is. That overlays on a terrain map, and it can tell me, because that water exists flat, it can tell me what is flooded up and downstream. So now we can immediately overlay that with like a U.S. structures overlay, and I can tell you how many structures are exposed, how much population lives in those buildings, right? I mean,
Nice.
like,
U.S.
this is
structures.
Some
I like
GIS
it.
stuff he's
Yeah,
throwing
man.
down
well,
right there.
I'm just a fireman.
Throwing out some tech
throwing out a
now.
little
No,
GIS.
no, but I mean, this, yeah. See, if it makes my job easier, then I'm in.
That's right. That's right. That's awesome. But you're also seeing day-to-day ops like Commissioner Teal. He's got that a beta running in at least one battalion in Philly with Florian 3 AM and some different hardware testing, I think. But I mean, they're tracking X, Y, and Z. So from the command posts, you've got a 3D visualization and can see where your personnel are. I think we still got some in larger structures, big box, whatever it might be. You have some connectivity issues, which can affect accuracy. So I think we still have some growth to do around that, but we're getting closer. And to me, that's one of the most important things as technologists we can provide is location services the entire time you're in a firefight. Because if there's a mayday, if there's one less thing I have to worry about, like where are they, right? And I can just work on getting to them to get them out. That's saving a large. I mean, that's building efficiencies into the response. You're getting the right resources to the right person at the right time.
Yeah.
So just an incredible impact there.
Well, do you guys ever see, you're talking about regulation earlier, do you ever see a mode where we require these large buildings to increase connectivity? Like, for your building to be in my city, we can't have stairwells that bonk, that we get no signal into. I mean, is that
I mean, I think it should be. The connectivity standard, I guess the issues we run into a lot as well, there is a way to track handhelds. Both Motorola and L3 Harris have that capability, XYZ. Your air pack telemetry is probably at least got XY.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to get that data. The problem I see is around the connectivity side in those large structures. And then what if we cut power, right? If there's some kind of system in there that's supplementing the connectivity or boosting a signal, then we cut the power, which is one of the first things we're going to do. How does that impact that connectivity? So those are the issues we're trying to work through, is how to maintain consistent connectivity with reasonably consistent accuracy. And I'm not talking about, inches. I'm talking about if I can keep it under 10 meters, I can at least try to guess what floor you're on in a high rise, right? Something like that. 10 feet, not 10 meters. 10 feet, I can try to guess where you are at least. I might miss by one, but at least I've got somewhere in that high rise to send my RIT team or whatever it is.
Well, we're at the point now where the tech is here,
Yes.
right? The technology, the capability exists. Now it's on us. Like you're asking about, should there be a code to help with connectivity and some of these things?
That's actually a good idea, by the way.
There are, yeah, well, that's pretty good. There are, in some localities, I've seen some of that. I know, like when we bought a new radio system before I retired in my department, we had a requirement in the CAD spec that went off with the radio system spec that it had to hit the repeater within so many, from the hip. We had a
Right.
from the hip measurement for tapping the repeater in large area buildings. So there's some of that you can do at a local level. But I mean, why that wouldn't be in the fire code, I don't know. It seems like that would be
That's a great
kind of
question.
common sense.
Yeah.
Or mobile connectivity that we bring with us
Yeah.
into the building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in these high-rise structures where we have traditionally very poor connectivity problems,
Yeah.
Why we're not boosting it ourselves.
I got to point to my friends in Greensboro, North Carolina. They've got their the GoVAP, their risk vulnerability tool. That basically a pre-planning tool. They call it a Signal 10. So if they discover something in their pre-planning process that they can't get out on the radio, they can log that in the it's an Esri platform.
Yep.
That they can log that and put that icon on that building and right away. So they use that to augment their comms. Like maybe they do something to the building. Maybe they add infrastructure to the building. Maybe they use something mobile.
Yeah. Go
That's-
direct.
Yeah.
On some of those radios,
Yeah.
you would go direct into them too.
That's
Nice.
awesome. Yeah, they do it. Another cool thing they do in Greensboro is they've just got one major symbol for this is bad.
Yeah.
It might be hazmat, it might be a radio thing, but it has that company officer dig into that data, like click on that symbol, see what's bad. Well, it might be mental
Sure.
health death, or it might be a connectivity problem. But it's pretty cool the way they do that, trying to not overload. The company officer is making 60 or 70 decisions in the first minute.
Right.
That just getting the right data to the right person, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
they did a damn good job down there in Greensboro.
I would say, when it comes to location, biometrics, atmospheric monitoring, I think every firefighter, we need that. I want that. I think our families want that. That's a technology that's an important piece that I hope over the next 3 to 5 years we can master that. I'm not sure how we're going to pay for it.
Right,
But
right.
we'll figure something out.
Yeah.
And put that on your radar. If that's something, if you're listening to this particular show, I mean, you're already probably data aware. You're probably technology savvy. So I mean, these are priorities. If we all push with the one voice, like we talked about, that we can make that happen. So, any closing thoughts before we get ready to head out to the show floor for some more?
I would just say, anybody that's listening, engage your technologists, the people providing you these applications, this software, this technology, and make sure you express your needs. Like let's start having a national conversation about XYZ tracking. I think more people from the fire service, you drive the market, so help us drive it, right? So get
Yeah.
involved and start pushing for what you need from the service providers you're engaged with.
No, I agree. I appreciate it and hang out today. To echo what you're saying, if firefighters who are line firemen have to take a little bit of interest even, or companies such as yourselves, like reaching back to firemen, because if we think we may need something, but if you don't know we need it, you don't know to build it.
Right,
Right.
right.
So that feedback of like, okay, this is what we're thinking, but do you actually, on the end user, what is this? How does this impact us? I mean, guys have to be involved, and that they will steer where this heads. Or you just get handed a product, and you're like, I don't like this. Well, you could have had feedback. Like,
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. Firefighters should be in the driver's seat. They should be driving that tech. The people that are going to use it, wear it, just their lives on the line. They should be the ones that are kind of showing us the way that we can go try to use technology and all these different tools to try to solve the problem. Well, Mike, thank you again for coming back this year.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having
Josh,
me.
darn
Yeah.
good to see you, man. I've really
Yeah.
enjoyed hanging out with you. And that's about a wrap for the Fire Service Data and Tech Talk podcast on fire engineering for 2025. You can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, Fire Service Data and Tech Talk. We have Data Tech Talk is the handle on X or Twitter or whatever the heck you call it now. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. So you just look for Eddie Buchanan on the LinkedIn page. And we'll be, I would love to know what you think. I'd love to know what you think about our discussion today. If you have ideas for the show, this show airs on the first Saturday of every month. So I would love for you to, put some input in. Tell us what's next. I'm always looking for fire departments that are doing something really cool, that are innovative, and probably coming down your way soon. I'll be reaching out to you guys, I'm sure. So always looking for those types of things. So be sure to check us next month. And we're live from FDIC 2005. Hope everybody stays safe. We'll see you again next year.